Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's presentation, Introduction to Winter Birding, presented by Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy and Loudoun County Public Library. My name is Kelly Sensor. I'm a programming coordinator for the library system and your host this evening. If you have questions for any of tonight's presenters, please type them in the chat box and I will relay them during the Q&A portion of our program. It's now my pleasure to introduce Michael Myers, Executive Director of the Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy, to share a little bit about the organization. Welcome, Michael.
Thanks, Kelly. As you mentioned, I'm the Executive Director of Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy, and we are a nonprofit organization here in Loudoun County who inspire, motivate, and engage people to preserve, protect, and restore wildlife habitat here in Loudoun County. And we do that through four main program areas: advocacy, citizen science, education, and habitat conservation programs. And within those four buckets, we have over 15 different unique programs. And we are a membership-based, volunteer-driven organization. And what that means is that we rely upon the generosity of our members to have the funds necessary to put on programs, and especially free programs, such as the one tonight. So Kelly's going to drop a link for our website in the chat box, so you can find out more about our organization and who we are and what we do. And as a volunteer-driven organization, all of our programs are run by volunteers. And so tonight we have our Young Birding program, which is one of our newest programs, which is a subset of our birding activities. And so Patrick Lewis is our volunteer coordinator or program coordinator for the Young Birding program. And so our birding activities are a lot of citizen science and education, which is what we have here tonight. So I'll kick it over to Patrick to introduce tonight's program.
All right, thank you, Michael. And as Michael mentioned, I'm Patrick Lewis. I'm the coordinator for the Young Birding program at Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy. And the Young Birding program aims to connect young people with birding, bird watching, and to help existing young birders improve their skills, meet other young birders, and just have a good time both in the field and at presentations like this. We're doing about one event a month, and that includes both lectures like this and walks in the field. You can check out Loudoun Wildlife's website for a list of events. Next month, we're going to have a walk at Algonquin Park in eastern Loudoun County on February 17th. And we're also going to have a quote-unquote normal bird walk, so your parents can go on that if they choose. And tonight, we're going to hear about winter birds and birding from Nick Newberry, who teaches biology in Warrenton. He's been birding for many years. He's seen over 1,300 species of birds worldwide, and we're very happy to have him here tonight to do this program and hopefully pass on some information to everyone here that they will find useful in their birding, whether you are an experienced birder looking to learn some new skills or just refresh your memory, or you've never birded and are interested in getting into birding and everything that goes with that, including the citizen science and the advocacy that Michael mentioned. So with that, I'd like to welcome Nick and turn it over to him.
Right. Thank you, Patrick, Kelly, and Michael. Appreciate it. Yeah, excited to be here tonight. See if I can get my screen sharing up. So yeah, my name's Nick Newberry. I've been living and birding in Northern Virginia. I'm based out of the Fairfax area, but I've been around here since I was about 7 years old, so a little over 20 years at this point. So this is really my home base. I've spent a few years down in Williamsburg, Virginia for school, and then afterwards for a few years, I've spent time birding abroad as well, in Switzerland, Madagascar, Borneo, a few other places. So birding's been a really big part of my life, and it's been a very enriching thing as well. And so we'll get into that. So I'm gonna frame this presentation, I've set it up to be kind of for everyone. So if you've never, really learned much about birds before, I set this up to be for you. And then hopefully if you're, a little bit more advanced or you spend a lot more time with this, I will, give you something new. And if not, you can ask questions at the end and I can sort of go into more detail on anything you'd like me to go into more detail on. So I just want to do a bit more of an introduction on myself. So I'm an environmental science teacher at the Highland School in Warrenton, Virginia. It's just an independent private school. So second career for me. My first career was as an environmental scientist at a consulting firm. So I did things like rare bird surveys, plant surveys, bat surveys, permit writing, wetland delineation, things like that. And kind of didn't really love that so much anymore. I made the switch to teaching about 4 years ago, and that's where I am now in high school. So I teach, like I said, environmental science, marine biology, and ecology. In terms of my birding involvement, I'm on the board of the Virginia Society of Ornithology, which deals with birds both on the research end and the wildlife observing end in Virginia. And I just started that position, I guess about 6 months ago, last year at this point. I'm involved with eBird in Virginia. If you're not familiar with eBird, I have a couple slides about it later on in my presentation. So we'll talk more about that when we get there. I also write for Virginia Birds, which is a quarterly publication put out by the Virginia Society of Ornithology about birds in the area. So this area, Northern Virginia, has a quarterly column about all of the interesting birds and trends that have happened in this area. So if that's something that you're interested in learning about, you can find that on Virginia Society of Ornithology website. This picture of me is in Virginia's tallest lighthouse, and it's the Cape Charles Lighthouse in Southern Virginia, off the eastern shore. I put that here because this was on a Christmas bird count a few weeks ago, and I'll talk more about Christmas bird counts if that's new to you, but I like birding for a lot of reasons. The birds are part of it, but the places they take me are almost equally part of it for me, and I'll get more into that later. All right, so with winter birding, a lot of it involves actually getting outside into the elements. So I just wanted to make a few comments on some things that really make or break a day out in the winter weather for me. A lot of things are sort of typical jackets and pants and things like that, but there are a few things that really make a key difference for me. One is good gloves. It tends to be kind of cold out there. And especially if you spend a lot of time outside, the cold really has a tendency to settle in. And I've found that if I step out of my house and I feel nice and warm, that's great, but I kind of need to plan to be a lot colder. And so taking binoculars, looking up and down a lot. But gloves are really great, especially if you're out for an hour or 2 hours, something like that. Hand warmers can also be really nice. I have a vest here, and that's to get at the idea of layering. Birding can be really cold if you're standing still. It can warm up if you're walking around a lot, but I really encourage layering. And that goes from t-shirts, long sleeve shirts, vests, jackets. A windproof layer is really nice, so a rain jacket or something like that. And then one of my favorite things is I wear running leggings under my pants in the winter, and that is a lifesaver for me, especially if it's a bit windy out. Of course, hats are great, although I like to have my ears uncovered because birds do make noises in the winter, not as much as in the spring and summer, but they do make calls that can help you find them. So I like a hat, but I like to have my ears free. One more note on footwear. So footwear is really important. I often will wear waterproof footwear, just depending on where I'm going, because there tend to be puddles or soggy ground in the winter, especially right now. We've had so much rain that it really can kind of get squishy, and having wet feet is no fun. Going along with that, having a dry pair of shoes to drive around in the car if you're getting somewhere by car can also be a lifesaver and help save a pretty big mess in a car. All right, so I'm going to talk about a few main habitat types that I think really shine in winter. So the first one is wetlands and water bodies. So in the wintertime, we get a lot of birds from up north that come further south. And one of the biggest groups is the waterfowl. So ducks, geese, swans, kind of things like that. And typically, this is the mid-Atlantic where we are is a really excellent area for that. Any pond, even small ones, all the way up to rivers, lakes, and bays, they almost all hold waterfowl. It does depend a bit on the time of, or a bit on the year. So some years are really excellent for waterfowl and some are not so great. So this year, because it's been so warm, we've seen a little bit less waterfowl diversity in general. But years where we get some nice cold snaps from the polar vortex or whatnot, when it freezes water bodies north of us, that tends to push more birds south. And so when it's really cold out, it tends to be really great for waterfowl. And a lot of people will tend to go towards larger places. Like around me, it's Burke Lake. I think in Loudoun, Beaver Dam Reservoir can be really excellent. But don't forget the small lakes and small bodies of water. Even on golf course ponds, really interesting things can show up. Around me, I found a greater white-fronted goose a few years ago, just at a golf course pond, American widgeon, and things like that. So even these little golf course ponds can host very interesting waterfowl. And around us, we have something like 25 species that might show up. So there's a really huge variety of different waterfowl around here. And especially later in the winter, come February and March, they'll start to display, especially hooded mergansers. I really love their displays. And they get up and they run around and they kind of dance on the water. And so I also encourage you all to spend some time watching them because the behavior can be really fascinating. And unlike songbirds, they can be easier to watch because they're either on top of the water, under the water, or flying away. If they're flying away, you don't get much of a look at them. But if you can find a good spot where the ducks are just out in the open, I really encourage just watching them, taking note of their behavior. And if you're lucky, you'll see them display, which can be a really fascinating behavior. And also another tip for that is to really pick through the ducks. Sometimes you'll have a large flock, and if you're very diligent, you look through it, you might find something different. It could be a rare species. Ducks are also known for having interesting hybrids. I was at Bellhaven Marina and Dyke Marsh over in Fairfax County a few years ago and found a hybrid northern pintail mallard duck, which was a really, really beautiful bird. There are also different variations of certain species. There's something called a storm widgeon, which is an American widgeon with a more white head. So there's lots of little gems, and one of my favorite things to do in birding just in general is to pick through flocks. It's something I enjoy. So if you see a big flock, it looks like all mallards, maybe take some time and look through them and see what's there. Also on the left here, I have a snipe. So snipe are birds that are really only here in the fall, winter, and spring. They can kind of blend into the grass. That's kind of their deal. You can see the stripes on their back, but they're often around pond edges, especially if there's some marshy area. And they're quite a cool bird if you can get to see them. Another one of my favorite things to do in winter is what I call putting a marsh to bed. So I'll go to a wetland area around dusk, and I'll just sit there for anywhere from half an hour to an hour from when it goes from sunset to when it gets dark. I like doing that for a few reasons. Waterfowl tend to move around a lot at dusk, and so sometimes you can see large numbers of birds flying into a marsh that you may not have seen a single bird, or you may have just seen a handful of birds during the daytime, and they just come and they spend the night there. But I think because it's safer to fly at night, the predators can't catch them on the wing as much. Ducks really move around at dawn and dusk. So I'll go to a wetland and just stand there for, like I said, half an hour to an hour. The snipe will sometimes pick up and fly away, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes after dusk, and they make a little like, wah, and they fly away. If you're lucky, you'll hear a rail. We get some rails in the winter here if it's not too cold. But yeah, there's always surprises. Sometimes there's a heron or two will fly by. If you put the marsh to bed in spring or fall, you might see a bittern fly out, an American bittern. So it's just something I really enjoy doing. All right. So the next one is edges and meadows. So on the right here is one of my favorite parks in the Fairfax area. This is called Waples Mill Meadow Park. It's near my house. It's kind of out of the Loudoun area a little bit, but you'll have some wonderful spots at Banshee and I think some of the other spots. I don't know. You all can probably figure those out better than I can. But edges of forests and meadows can be amazing places in the winter. There's a lot of activity in them because there's a lot of seeds. And so these attract sparrows and things like cardinals and towhees. A lot of the forest birds tend to like the edges as well. So chickadees, titmouse, yellow-rumped warbler, things like that. And so I really like to work edges, especially where habitats change from one habitat type to another. So from forest to field, for example. It tends to be very productive. And a lot of these sparrows come from up north and they spend the winter here. So the bird I have on the left here is a white-crowned sparrow. It's a juvenile. They come from the boreal forest. So they're visiting from far away, and it's nice to see them. There's about a dozen species that can be found in our area. There's some more common ones like song sparrows and white-throated sparrows, and some more uncommon ones like white-crowned, depending where you are, American tree sparrow, even things like clay-colored sparrow. But spend some time working edge habitat, scrubby areas. That's where there's a lot of life in the winter. Power line cuts, even the edges of parking lots can be really fascinating. You don't need a really pristine park. Really anywhere you have that transition can be excellent. In Virginia Beach now, the really hot spot is a retention pond next to a Harris teeter. They've had painted buntings there, Lincoln sparrows, white-crowned sparrows, ash-throated flycatchers. There have been some really remarkable birds just at this retention pond next to a Harris teeter. So it doesn't have to be a really spectacular park or anything like that. It can be anywhere where there's just grasses. One of the things that I do to sort of draw the sparrows out is called pishing, and it sounds kind of like this. And pishing it mimics kind of an alarm call, and so the birds will come out sometimes and not other times. I do it sort of sparingly. I sort of think about it in my mind as I'm asking the birds to come out. And so I don't ask them to come out all the time because sometimes I'll just enjoy them, going about their normal behavior. As far as I know, there's no science out there about if pishing causes a huge amount of stress for them. From decades of observing them, I've never seen any sort of detrimental impact on them. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but I sort of use pishing sparingly. But I do it sometimes because it draws the birds out and I can see them better. And then I'll move on after a couple minutes. So woodlands in the winter don't tend to be very birdy. On the left here is a tufted titmouse, one of our year-round forest birds. They are one of the ones you can find in the middle of woodlands, chickadees, goldfinches. But I tend to steer clear of woodlands a little bit more in the winter. That's like pure dense woodlands. A lot of woods around here do have scrubby areas with grassy parts where the birds tend to be. Most of the sparrows in the woods tend to be more white-throated sparrows and song sparrows. Sometimes you get eastern towhees, cardinals, a handful of other birds, but the diversity tends to be a bit lower than in more grassy areas. So the next is coastal opportunities. So we are not on the coast. It takes a little while to get there. There are two main coastal areas to visit in the wintertime. The first is the Delaware shore and the eastern shore of Maryland. These are areas where people have traditionally gone from the Northern Virginia area. You can see a lot of birds there that aren't seen in Northern Virginia, things like harlequin duck, which are just stunning. You can see things called alcids, which is a group of birds that include razorbill and dovekie. And these are kind of like the penguins of the Northern Hemisphere. And they can be really cool to see. There are rare birds like Iceland gulls, glaucous gull, snow buntings. Yeah, there's just a lot of fun stuff on the coast that's just not found here. And it's about a 3-hour drive. I know a lot of people do it in a day. It's kind of a long day, but I've done it several times. You can also make a weekend of it and head on out there. This is my professor from my undergrad, Dan Crystal, down at William and Mary. And you can see he's looking through a scope. So these field scopes really do improve the viewing of waterfowl in particular. Here, Dan is looking off into the Atlantic Ocean. It brings things anywhere between 20 and 60 times closer. Binoculars are anywhere from usually 6 times closer to 10 times closer. So it really does make a big difference. Scopes are a bit of an investment. So you, let's see. I just want to make sure you can hear me. So I had something.
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Okay, my camera just cut out. It's a little bit weird sometimes.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, so scopes can be a really powerful tool. If you don't have a scope, you can still go bird watching. You can still look at ducks. They're just a big improvement. One way you can get access to a scope without paying for it is to go on guided walks, or if you're going somewhere like the Delaware shore, places like Rehoboth Beach area in Maryland, the Ocean City Inlet. I think it's Indian River Inlet in Delaware. There are often people around, and so you can just go up and ask. And most people are really quite willing to let you look through their scope. Even if they look super intense, just go up and ask them. They're probably nice, and we'll let you look through their scope. Yeah, the other place is Virginia Beach. So that's a bit more of a drive for 4 to 5 hours. And that's probably one you shouldn't do in a day. I've done it in a day once before, but it was kind of crazy. There's a lot of great birding opportunities down there as well. I want to talk about rare birds in the winter because rare birds are kind of fun. These are birds that aren't really expected to be here or show up in Virginia every year, but in very low numbers. So this one in the top right is an ash-throated flycatcher, and I found this one down in Williamsburg a few weeks ago. This has been a really fascinating fall and winter for the ash-throated flycatcher. It's a species that's turned up in Virginia a handful of times before and is usually found every year. But this year there have been well over a dozen. I don't know what the number is at this point. It might be 20, which is truly exceptional. And it's not just been an event limited to Virginia. This has gone all the way up through at least New York State. And they've just been abundant in a lot of different places. So I think that's kind of cool. On the bottom left is a long-billed curlew. There's at least one, I think 2 of them being seen on the eastern shore of Virginia from, I think it's Box Tree Marsh. And this is a fascinating and kind of goofy, but really cool looking bird, in my opinion, that may come from somewhere in like the upper Midwest. There also may be like a small breeding population in the east somewhere. I don't think it's fully known, but it's a fun time to go look for rare birds, and I'll I'll kind of let you know how to find rare birds here in a bit. But it's a fun time. Right now down at Widewater State Park, I think it's in Stafford County, sort of near Fredericksburg. There are two very rare birds, the Bullock's oriole and the western kingbird, that have been eating berries and hanging out in the same patch of this state park for a few weeks at this point. So rare birds, I just kind of like to go see them sometimes. They're from other habitats. They're not often found here, and it's just something that's kind of special. And also tend to run into other birders at these rare birds. That can be fun to just run into people and talk if hanging out with other birders is your thing. Okay, so I also want to make a point to don't forget to look around. Birds are a great reason to get out, and they can be the target of an experience, but I encourage you to look around and enjoy the environment around you while you're out there. This is a sunset over here. This is actually taken from Maryland this fall. And then on the right is the view out of the lighthouse that I visited during a bird count a couple weeks ago. And there's just some really beautiful areas. I mean, birding has gotten me to so many obscure areas that I would have never gone to before. Some of them are, I'm glad I'm in. Some of them I kind of questioning myself, but there's just really beautiful scenery around. And then I want to make a pitch beyond birding. So birds are great. The scenery can be beautiful. But birding can be a great way to like travel around the state too. So one of the things that I like to do is go visit different counties in the area. So I used to do this a lot more. I do a little bit less now, but go to places like Orange County or Greene County or Rappahannock County, which are all within a couple hours of here, and just go birding on some back roads or some parks that people don't go to all that often, and just kind of use it as an excuse to be a tourist in my own state. I like to try out local restaurants, and I always encourage people to eat local when they can. And then I'm 28. I like to drink beer sometimes. Virginia has a really thriving craft beer. I don't know if industry is the right word, but almost community. And so there are local breweries all over the state. Some of them are more well known, some of them are less well known, but they all have their own character. And that's something I've really enjoyed doing. Because it can be cold. You don't always want to be outside the entire day if you have a whole day set aside for birding. So you can go take a break at a local restaurant or have a drink of beer or two. I want to make a pitch for something I really enjoy every year. It's the Highland County Maple Festival. It's the second and third weekend of March every year. It's out in Highland County, which is west of Charlottesville, about 2 hours, and it celebrates Virginia's maple syrup industry. There are a lot of local places that make maple syrup, and you can go and you can tour they call them sugar shacks. You can see where they get their syrup from, their old trees. Some of these farms are 8th generation. It's really amazing. But you compare that with birding. Highland County in March is a good spot for golden eagles. If you're lucky, I was out there one time and there were just fox sparrows everywhere. I saw over 100 fox sparrows in an hour, and that can be a really hard species to see. So sort of pairing birding with other things is something I enjoy doing. It's also winter. It's dark outside. It can be cold. Sometimes you want to enjoy birds without actually seeing birds. And so books are a great way to do that. I'm reading this one right now called Birding Under the Influence, Cycling Across America in Search of Birds in Recovery by Dorian Anderson. Dorian did a big year. So a big year is a thing in birding culture. It has been for several decades where birders will go out and dedicate an entire year to finding birds. And it's usually to build the biggest list possible in a certain geographic area. So that can be anywhere from a single county. So someone could do a Loudoun County big year all the way up to the entire globe. This guy, Dorian Anderson, he did a biking big year. So he biked something like 16,000 miles in the year. He started off in the Northeast during one of the polar vortexes in 2014. And this chronicles his 16,000 mile journey. He is also a recovering alcoholic and drug addict. And so this is sort of talks about his story with recovery. And he's a very witty, clever, smart guy. So it's kind of, I like when birding intersects with other things. So that's kind of a good example of that. He's now a full-time birding tour guide. He used to be a research scientist at the top research institutes on the planet on molecular cell biology. On the right is Sparrow Envy. It's a small book of poetry by J. Drew Lanham, who's one of my favorite sort of bird philosopher and sort of artist types. He talks a lot about the intersection of social justice and race and birding. So I really like that. This book just came out. I haven't had a chance to crack it open yet. Better Living Through Birding by Christian Cooper. If some of you may know, but he was in Central Park back in 2020 and ran into really racist encounter with a woman threatening to call the cops on him for trying to tie up his dogs. Anyway, it blew up and it was national news. If you're not aware of that, it's pretty easy to look up. But he's a really cool guy. He hosts a TV show now that I show my students about birding in different parts of the world, and I'm looking forward to looking this up. Another great kind of book you can crack open is a field guide. So field guides are just books that help you identify birds in different areas, and you can buy field guides for basically every corner of the planet at this point. Sometimes I like just flipping through one and fantasizing about birds in warmer places or just places I can't go at the moment. So on the citizen science front, I know that's something that LWC does a lot. We've got Project Feeder Watch, which is run through the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. Ornithology is just the study of birds. And this is something that happens in February every year. And you can participate in it. So maybe going and spending a whole day out staring at the ocean isn't really your thing, but you still really like birds and you have a bird feeder set up. This is a great way to participate in science and a great way to learn a little bit more about your birds. So Project Feeder Watch has a lot of resources to help you learn more about backyard birds. So if you're sort of want to learn more about that, this is a great resource. And you can contribute data that then scientists and data scientists use to assess bird trends and in the world. So you're helping contribute to science, but ideally you're also learning something in the process. Christmas bird count. So it's something I've mentioned already, but the Christmas bird count is something that just finished up, but it is a nationwide, and actually it's international at this point, but it's a bird count that's been going on for about 130 years. That started in the early 1900s. And so what happens nowadays is you go out with a bunch of other people, and there are these 15-mile diameter circles that are placed all over the country and beyond at this point. And they're divvied up into sectors, so they kind of make it pieces of the pie. And you join up with people and go out and count birds. And then you submit all that data to the Audubon Society, which has kept track of this data for well over a century at this point. And that data has been really critical for assessing bird populations over time and noting declines in some species, in more species, and increases in fewer species. And that's one I really enjoy. LWC, I think, sponsors the Central Loudoun Christmas bird count, which I've participated in many times. And they have a great compilation dinner at the end where you get together and share your bird sightings and get to talk with people. This is me this year. I'm in the sector just south of Leesburg, and I posted this picture because it shows One of the reasons why I like Christmas bird counts, because it's a great time to spend time with people. I'm here with my mom, and she's not a big birder, but she does like to come out with me sometimes, and the Christmas bird count's a good excuse to spend some time with her. I've been joining this crew here for probably 7 years at this point, so we kind of just, it's like an annual tradition at this point. Woman in the bottom left, she's a teacher as well, and so we got to talk shop a little bit, and she ended up inviting me over to her school, which is a really cool one. That does sort of trade skills and stuff like that. So I like birds because they are sort of an avenue, an excuse to meet people and sort of enrich my life in many ways. It's not just about the birds. So I also like to talk about giving back to the birds, and I know this is a big part of LWC's mission. So on the bottom left, I'm involved in Fairfax County with restoring our forests. So we remove invasive species and we plant native species. That's called the IMA program, the Invasive Management Area Program. There's just an article circulating a couple weeks ago about how forests in the East are in decline. And so a lot of times people think about forests being set aside and that being enough. As long as you protect a forest from development, it's going to be there forever. But this article went in and assessed the long-term outlook for forests, and a lot of the forests they looked at do not have a good future if they aren't helped. And so that has to do with a lot of things, some things which are a little bit more difficult to control, like diseases and the impacts of climate change. But some are very much in our hands that we can take care of, and that has to do with invasive species. And I'm almost certain LWC either does stuff with this or works with partners that work with invasive species, so removing them so our native species have the best chance possible at surviving in a changing climate and with other pressures from development. So that's a really important part for me. I feel like I give back to the birds and they give back to me. And so it feels like an act of reciprocity that makes birding more meaningful for me. On the right is, I went to a march for the climate march in New York City last week, or no, sorry, not last week, a few months ago, last fall. And that's something that I really enjoy. I try to make these acts of reciprocity something that enrich my life, not just a solemn duty to save the birds or something like that. So all of these things that I do really enrich my life. It's not just like paying for the birds or something like that. Okay, let's see. We're at 39. We want to go until like 45 or so, or
Yep, that's fine. Whenever
okay.
you're ready. We've got a few questions, but you can continue or finish your presentation first.
Okay. I just want to talk about eBird here at the end. This is my last thing. So eBird is a citizen science project. So citizen science is where people, citizens of the world, it's not meant to be a citizen of the United States or anything like that, but citizens of the world can go out and collect data and share that data with scientists. So then scientists can run analyses, in the case of eBird, about population trends and a few other things that they couldn't without the data from everyday people. So eBird, you can go out and watch birds and keep track of how many birds you see. You can add pictures of them. You can write notes about their behavior and submit it to eBird. And that has allowed some really fascinating science to take place in terms of like allowing some really amazing modeling of populations on a really fine scale. So I encourage you to explore eBird in the science tab if you're interested in the sciencey part of that. But eBird is a great way to enrich your birding and to inform your birding. So I wanted to just spend a couple minutes showing some of the key features of eBird. There are full tutorials on eBird. They have an education center. So if you really want to learn more, there are a lot of resources out there. So I'm not going to duplicate those, but I do want to just show you some of my favorite ones. The first is Explore Hotspots. So I'm going to plug in Leesburg here. So I'm going to turn it to terrain. So on this map, you can see a lot of different pins. Some of them blend in a bit because they're green in the background screen, but they show you different hotspots, and hotspots are just anywhere that people tend to go birding. Multiple people tend to go birding. Doesn't necessarily mean they're publicly accessible, although most of them are. And you can get more information about what birds are there. So this is Old Isaac Walton Park. You can see what's been seen most recently here under last seen. Another thing I like to do is the bar charts over here on the left. And the bar charts show you what's liable to be there when. So if you're going to be there in the winter, you can zero in on birds that are most likely to be sitting there in the winter. So for example, gadwall, which is a really handsome gray duck, you can see it in January and February. Maybe not every visit because not every bar is filled up, but you can see it in the winter, whereas you wouldn't expect to see it in the summer months. So you can get a sense for what's there when. So hotspots are great, and there's some really well-known hotspots. So some of the most well-birded ones around the Leesburg area. We've got Banshee Reeks, a really wonderful place to go. Over 206 birds reported there. We've got places like Bless Park, and Patrick runs his surveys at Algonquin Regional Park. So there's some really amazing spots to go, but it's also fun to, I think, explore new places. So maybe choose a hotspot that doesn't really have much data. And somewhere like this, Kilowog Lake, I don't know anything about it, but I do know that random ponds can be good in winter for ducks. And so this might be somewhere I'd go if I wanted to just check somewhere. This is the kind of pond that might have hooded mergansers, bufflehead, and in special circumstance might have a canvasback or a redhead or something like that. When I lived in Williamsburg, there's this small little stormwater pond next to a hospital, and it's had some really amazing birds at it, like redhead duck, pectoral sandpiper, bufflehead. So it pays to check those little ponds as well. So don't shy away from the places that are off the beaten path. Sometimes that's where the most rare and exciting birds are, or just the best views of stuff. So if you're interested in rare birds, you can go to these alerts down here, and you can plug in Loudoun County. So we'll see what's going on in Loudoun County in terms of rare birds. So we'll just hit view here. So there are 2 trumpeter swans found at Broad Run, 4 sandhill cranes at Algonquin. Those sandhill cranes are in and out of there. They've been there for several years. They can be a little tough to see, but they are there. We can see they're confirmed here. So the data quality review team at eBird deems them likely to have been, or well documented enough to be accepted into the database. So yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else here on eBird. If you just want to look at photos, you can search photos and sounds. There's a really amazing data set there. Kind of a little known thing that people sort of miss on sometimes is a photo and sound quiz. So if you're planning to travel somewhere, let's just say planning to go to Costa Rica, it's a place people like to go. And you pick July 21st, just pick a day, and photos. It'll create a quiz of birds that you're likely to see there. So you can go through and just practice, and it's kind of a cool way to learn. You're like, oh, that one looks like I don't know my Costa Rican bird, striped-breasted wren. Oh, I'm wrong. It's a banded wren. And you can just kind of go through and practice a little bit. So I'll leave it there with eBird, and I will turn it over for any questions.
Thanks, Nick. We do have about a half dozen questions, and if anyone else has something they would like to ask Nick, definitely feel free to type it in the chat. I'm sorry you lost your camera, but we will press on, and we appreciate you doing the same. First question, how early do you like to get out in the morning? Is there a time span when the birds are more active?
Yeah, can you hear me? I'm having a problem.
Yes.
Okay. It's being finicky. It might drop for a second. Okay.
Okay.
So in the winter, it doesn't matter so much to be out there at the crack of dawn, but I like to get out there when the sun hits for sparrows and things like that. But it's kind of like in the spring, I like to get out right at the crack of dawn, but it's really not as important, I think, um, in the winter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another question, it says, what binocular scopes are used? This particular person has 10 by 50s and 10 by 40s. So if you could speak a little bit about equipment.
Yeah, I mean, it's whatever works for you. If you're using binoculars that are frustrating you, then it's probably time to get another pair. A lot of it depends on what you're comfortable with, what fits your eyes well. And for that, I encourage you to go into an optics store. I don't know of any, particular ones. A lot of the Wild Birds Unlimited or Backyard. There's a few different ones, but go into a local bird store and ask them. Yeah, because they can help you best, or you can always call up an optics manufacturer if you want. But really, you want to get them in hand and see what's comfortable. Because if it's annoying, it's not gonna stop annoying you, and then you're not gonna want to use them.
Hey, this one relates to birdhouses and nesting. So we'll see if you're able to respond. Here's what's written. Do birds and squirrels, mice, sugar gliders, I'm presuming flying squirrels, compete for cavities in birdhouses for overwintering? I found a sugar glider in one of my bluebird boxes last winter, and my 4 to 6 bluebirds in the yard have been regularly checking out the nest boxes, adding nest materials. So I wondered about when to clear out those birdhouses for spring nesting.
Yeah, so I'm not really an expert on this, but I know they do compete. I have had one really memorable moment around here when I saw a red-bellied woodpecker going into a cavity and then quickly getting back out. And there's something kind of going back and forth with.
Did we lose you, Nick? Sorry, friends, we may have lost Nick. I don't know if Patrick or Michael are available right now, if they have any questions. The flying squirrels obviously use the nest boxes too. And I apologize, I don't know the answer to that question, but Cornell Lab of Ornithology is a great resource. Patrick, did you want to weigh in with any information?
I don't know the particular answer to that question, but the general wisdom as far as cleaning out birdhouses is you want them cleaned out when spring nesting begins. And here in Loudoun County in the Mid-Atlantic, with climate being what it is, birds are nesting earlier. So I would say now is, if you do it now, if you do it for the next month or 2 months, certainly by March 1st. And I have a bluebird box. I've had bluebirds look at my box in February, which at one time would have been kind of unthinkable. But I would say sometime over the winter, clear it out. Just make sure it's clear by early spring, even late winter.
Thank you. I want to share a comment. One of our participants mentioned that Merlin is a great app for your phone to identify birds by sound when you can't see them. I will add, I do a lot of programs for youth, particularly elementary age, and it's a great beginner app for young kids because it focuses on, in addition to sound, it has the ability to detect those, but if you see a bird and can name its colors and where it is, it does a good job of helping to identify it. So I know kids get pretty excited when they find a match. One other participant, Patrick, you can answer this, and I will share the link again. Do you have summer birding programs, and how about youth birding activities and programs? So Patrick, if you just want to, share a little more.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, we do have field programs. February 17th at 9 a.m. at Algonquian Park in Eastern Loudoun County. We're going to have a young birding walk. So if you go to loudounwildlife.org, go to the events tab, February 17th. Registration for that will open up in about a week. And we plan to have an event either online or in the field once a month or so. So we will have a lecture in the summer. Summer birding, some people say it's kind of slow, but that's when a lot of really interesting behavior is happening, and you can get rarities in the summer that are really interesting too. So we'll certainly have programs in the summer and walks every month, every other month.
Fantastic. And I just went ahead and shared the link again to the Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy Young Birding Program. So that'll have links for signing up for the newsletter. So you're always stay updated on the activities. So that's terrific. I have another question. I'm not sure if Patrick and I will be able to answer, but we will do our best and can relay them and follow up perhaps later. With the winter months, what birds come south but don't go all the way south? And maybe like hang out here in Virginia, since it's not really winter here sometimes. I don't know. Patrick, are you able to weigh in on any of that?
Yeah,
Sort of the seasonal visitors, if you will.
Yeah, so there's two main kind of categories of birds that this is south for them. This is their South America. And these are all birds that are nesting, breeding in the summer in even the Arctic, even north of the Arctic Circle in Canada and the northern US. There's waterfowl that we have way more ducks here in the winter than any other time of year, way more ducks. You go out the Beaver Dam Reservoir, you can sometimes see over 1,000 ducks. Scope recommended. Beaver Dam is not a small body of water, but any body of water, you can find ducks and even mallards, which we have all year. There's a lot more mallards here. And then birds that are probably easier to see than ducks are going to be backyard birds. Passerines is the scientific name for them, but it's just a songbird. And those would be dark-eyed juncos and white-throated sparrows. Dark-eyed juncos are colloquially called snowbirds because when we used to have snow here, they showed up in that season when we used to have snow. They're smaller than a cardinal. They're sparrow size. In fact, they are a sparrow, although they don't have sparrow in the name. Dark-eyed junco. They're black above, white below, so you're not gonna mis-ID that. They're the only bird that's black and white. And then white-throated sparrows are little brown birds. They're a sparrow. They've got a little bit of yellow on their head above their eye, so that's kind of the defining ID mark there. And all those birds nest in the high north, and this is warm enough for them.
Great. And just a quick related plug. The library is partnering with Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy again. February 1st at 7 p.m. at our Russ Library. It'll be an in-person program. We are doing Searching for Birds of Prey because there are a lot of seasonal birds, right, that boost our populations of raptors in the winter time. And a raptor expert, Liam McGranahan, will be doing that presentation. So those of you with interest in learning more about winter birds, I definitely recommend that program. I posted a link to the event page in the chat. I don't see any other questions right now. And I do want to say I appreciate everyone hanging in there with us through some technical issues on Nick's side. But I hope you learned a few things. Patrick, did you have anything else you wanted to share or information you think maybe young birders might be interested in knowing? Or
I would just say that I hope you found this interesting. If you're a young birder or you're someone who knows young birders, I hope you'll pass on Loudoun Wildlife and Young Birding Program to them. Again, this is a newish, couple of months old program, so I hope you'll let people know about it. We'll have another online lecture in March about IDing spring migrators, so we'll have more information out about that in the next month or so. And I really hope you enjoyed it. And I want to thank Nick, despite his technical difficulty at the end. That was a good time for a technical difficulty to happen.
okay, Nope, that's terrific. And yep, so definitely check out the young birding resources on the Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy page. And even if you have littles that are interested in birds, you know, the library also has nature programs for them. For instance, I know the Ashburn Library, I believe it's March 12th at 4 p.m. They're doing a bird program for elementary age kids. So we've got birding for everyone. So I thank everyone for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you outdoors and at the library.